The following is a talk I had with Tony Blake at Portland, Oregon, whilst we were attending the All and Everything Conference 2018.
Now this situation is where my name is Anthony Blake. I'm with my friend Debbie, who's recording and giving me moral support and other kinds of support to fulfill a little bit or assuage some of my frustration in coming to this All and Everything conference, and I thought I would work up a paper about some aspect of Gurdjieff's work, but I wasn't allowed to do so. So she said, why not take this chance? We could still do something and record it and make use of it. And I thought that was a very good solution.
That's right. And you said it'd be the alternative conference.
Oh, yeah. With just a very minority group, two people are being naughty and playing truant.
That's it. We should be at a seminar, but we're
sessions,
not.
I'm sure we would be taken to task by somebody or other to join in all of this. But this just our simple coming together. Before the recording started, I had this picture came to my mind of because there have been papers about, they're all about All and Everything, Gurdjieff's book, and it suddenly struck me about this picture of poor Mr. God at the beginning of everything, on his own, as we say in English, on his Todd, and suddenly, the first time I thought he must have been a little bit sad, or I don't know, using those silly anthropomorphic terms. But what a difference it is when somebody else comes into the room, and then you can have this conversation. And of course, all the main religions have given expression to that in so many ways, including the idea that God was felt lonely. Or some of the early cosmologies were very much like this, even African ones. You see, the spirit, I think, was alone, and so wanted to have a companion.
So he created, or it created.
So yeah, had to create. And Gurdjieff refers to it in quite a complex way in the third series of a further amplification of it is literally separating himself from his beloved son, this kind of thing, and to make it a very strong thing. And why have that insistence for separation? Because that is the occasion or the incentive for something new and interesting. It's a bit like, in some of the Christian traditions, the expulsion from Eden and so on is celebrated as a wonderful positive event. Why? Because it necessitated Christ would be born on earth to redeem it, you see. And there is a sense in which only by things going wrong, as somebody was mentioning in our previous talk, can there be something really new. Because if it all went right, there would be nothing new.
It would just be continuous.
Yeah. The same again, love.
Mm-hmm.
As it was.
The same things happening in Eden every day. They wander the gardens,
That's
had their
right.
fruit.
Exactly.
Had the angels sing to them.
Absolutely. Gosh, I wonder what it was. I'm going off on the tangent now that even people like Milton wondered about their sex life in Eden, what it would have been like if you had all the troubles outside of Eden. And these people actually trying to imagine what sex in Eden was like, But you think
But they need it though, because they're already in bliss.
That's right. There's no incentive to do that, to get some recompense from the toils of life and the troubles of life and so on. But then, yeah. So, and I mentioned separation. I was very intrigued to learn once that, you talk about chaos and creation, that kind of thing. But I learned from somewhere that the original meaning of this word chaos was not disorder, it was a gap or void.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at all the early creation myths, and all about, many of them have this separation between earth and sky.
And there was a void in between.
Void in between.
Yes.
Then it gets interesting. So you get a first stage of creation, which is setting up separation, and the second about what goes into it and all the argy-bargy and trouble and strife which happens in it. Okay. So.
Because in most everything comes from nothing, which would be that void.
Yeah. It's of course Gurdjieff accentuated it practically. He said, "Must make vacuum." You know, that's the greatest art in life. Make a vacuum. Don't just keep on down the same rat wheel, whatever it is. You know, the same circuit, round and round. You're trying to deal with life, and you know what it is. We're just recurrent machines. You say that every day. Yeah. So make a break, make a stop, make something like that. So how can you make a stop, a break? Because this is for me I got my theme here of reconciliation, you see, contributes to, I think, a richer understanding of reconciliation. Because there's one simplistic view of it, or I call it simplistic from my judgment, that is to say, well, you get a conflict as something which a lot of people regard as negative and use that word negative about it. There's disagreement, discord, conflict, and so on. But then this reconciliation comes in, and it's all happy, which is
bliss.
Pardon?
The bliss.
The bliss. Well, it's a kind of soppy bliss, if I put it that way. You know, it's because then you think, that's all over then. But what if I take a different stance and saying that, well, when you get this kind of reconciliation, I'm struggling at this moment to find another kind of word, because reconciliation is meaning, okay, we get this agreement, we get this peace, we sign the peace treaty, we sort things out and all the rest of it. But what if it is something which actually, almost in a sense, amplifies that discord in the first place? Not to call it discord, but that difference. Because you've got to have this difference, you see. It's like, well, a weak example is two different points of view, or something like that, you see. But there might be other better examples, and so the reconciliation comes in to enable them to stand together. See what I mean? Because only in life, I would say, and often we get that kind of differences, you know, the one and the other kind of divorce themselves from each other, or shut the other one out, or try to. You know, they can get very painful in a relationship and so on. But they can't. So what could happen, for example, is, say, if you had a difference and a conflict, and therefore you have an energy, and that's part of the positive role of reconciliation. And you don't want to do this energy, but there has to be this component of enabling people to bear it. Because I found in my work, you know, interest in dialogue and so on, that often I feel that most of us most of the time, don't really experience and recognize that we think differently. You know, we give lip service. Of course, you know, Debbie, you think differently from me about, you know, sure we do. We can, each has her own opinions and all this sort of, but when it comes to actually being in the same space about the same issue, then I found it, you know, people are astonished. And why?
Isn't it because people want to be the same? They feel secure if they're in doing the same thing with everybody else. I'm one of them.
That's it.
Being part of the herd.
Yeah.
And we're not.
Yeah. So this is like, we're in a position then of a failed God, because we come into the other and we just want to deny it, so to speak, or suppress it. And you even get that in certain religions. It's like, well, world's all gone wrong, you see, and we got all these angels and messengers to put it right. What the hell would putting it right mean? So it means that there's a lovely image in the Sumerian epic Enuma Elish, which means when on high, and it's the first line of the poem. When on high, the gods had not been formed, and so on. It says things had not been formed, things had not been made, and it's talking about the beginning of the universe. But it reaches a stage where we've got these protagonists. The two main ones are Tiamat, which is the bitter waters of the ocean, and Apsu, the sweet waters of the abyss, and they generate the gods. But then the gods surge around and make clamor and upset Tiamat, and so they threaten to exterminate them. You see, but there's a strong upstart there who prevents this extermination. And therefore we have the world. But that's a picture of this warfare, so to speak, because difference, and as psychological difference, is difficult to bear.
Mm-hmm. There seems to be a striving for everyone to be the same, even in modern life, don't they? They have the same house, same get a job.
Conformism is rife, isn't it? You know, you get these pseudo choices now. You know, 1,000 channels, TV channels. It's all the same kind of mediocrity and this kind of thing. So here's how can we stand together? And I think I would suppose, and I believe that a lot of interesting things could have happened when you get people who are really different to work together, for example, you see. And so what comes in? We start by, one of my favorite mystical things, of course, is saying of Christ, when 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, then am I with them, which is a most beautiful expression. If you want to say, what is kind of an additional member of the little gathering, but not to add to the complexity, so to speak, but to make the meaning of their gathering differently. And so it's giving them an ableness, this ableness to bear, to bear difference. And it's a very interesting thing. So you don't only get the gap, the separation, but also this enablement. When I was with, I somehow felt up with Mr. Bennett and picked up from him, so I can't give specific references and so on because it was so accepted about our situation. Even though it's said in some of Gurdjieff's phrases, you know, we are in need of ableness, is to be able. Mr. Bennett made a whole concept out of this. He called it hypoxis, but we won't go there in this conversation. But it's like, Gurdjieff was straightforward. You want to do this, you want to be a good person, whatever it is, but are you able to be a good person? And where do you get the ableness from? And there's always this puzzle, because you can't quite pull yourself up by your bootlaces, love. So, what is it? You get a freebie, and that's called divine grace, which is a freebie, you see. Or do you get a kind of loan, as in certain traditions say you can borrow some baraka as long as you pay it back? Because baraka is a term for this ableness. And this is, when I started talking, was around trying to feel my way towards, rethinking or feeling this primary word of reconciliation, which may not be peaceful in this simplistic way, but preserves the energy, because there is indifference and energy.
Yes, there is.
There's a bit of, it's the old, what he used to say, Gurdjieff, friction, and you can light a fire with it. But the management and organization of this comes from something else.
But do you think that energy is quite subtle, and that's why people miss it?
No, I think what they get involved in is discharging it.
Ah, okay.
And that's another briefing, in my opinion, hints of it in modern neurological research about the brain, how the brain works. Brain works to minimize what's called physics, free energy. Now, you see, most of our lives are like routine. You see, we go out of routine, like there's a crisis. See, that's going out of routine. Now, that can have very positive outcomes. Suddenly, people are able to do all kinds of things, you know, rescue people and that kind of thing, and actually talk to each other. But there's another way you can get energy which is generated, and people have nothing to put it into directly, you see, so they react and you get this, you know, violence and all this kind of, which I call discharge. They have to discharge it because they're trying to reach in their brains down to equilibrium again. Mm-hmm. You know, the status quo, that's the whole tendency. So you've got to catch this. And it's like, one, dozing away, then two, going, oh my God, and three, wow, you know, something new happens, and that's more the pattern of it.
But I find some people, when that something new happens, they either run with it or they want to go back to dozing.
I think that's fair. That's exactly right. And because running with it involves this kind of really, if you make friends with the unknown sort of attitude in it, isn't it? You must know this. You know, you don't. That's the whole point. It's not the old thing again. A new guy is, you know, it's got a chance of doing something different. That's great. That's really nice. Well, let's go to the those various conversations and books about the triad, which features so much in Gurdjieff's writings, and which he made a lot of fuss about. And there's some things I'd like to say about this, some preliminary things which are pretty widely known. But it's how let's paraphrase and say how in life, these three elements, how to express it, are,
as in the affirming, the denying and the reconciling.
for example, that's right, but only become or take on those roles when they come together. So it's not as if, you know, so I'm raising the question, see, well, three, okay, but the whole drama is them meeting, getting together, you see. Gurdjieff actually says they are kind of all interesting in their own right because they're independent. He says they've got to be independent. But then they come together, then they take on these roles you just mentioned in relation to each other, but only in relation to each other. Because there can be a tendency, you pick up this thing, active, passive, neutral, and you attach them to things, you know what I mean, as if they were just floating around there, that's active, floating around there, receptive. It's not, it's only when these terms come together, as they come together, as imagine they're going, you know, and
it creates something.
Creating that role. And why do you have to have that role? But you can say, well, one way he put it was to invent in his mythology the planet Modexirio, I think it is, where you have three sexes coming together. You know, he makes quite a lot about this, which I think is very interesting. But he emphasizes how the three coming together, you have something complete. And there's a way which just the two can't manage. As there was something not complete, not sorted out with the two.
Because as the two, weren't they fighting each other?
Yes.
And having that third force. Or creating that third force.
It's like I don't know. What is it? Maybe come back to us. I'm still trying to go along this sense of the three elements don't start off with the labels on them, but only make it mutually. And why do they make it mutually? Let's look at this, you see. It's because it's to do this profundity, I call it profundity, of difference. See, how different can difference be? This kind of thing, see.
How different can difference be?
Yeah, it comes up in the dialogue, you see. You get the two coming together and then begin to, between naturally there's polarity, some kind of difference, differentiation between them because they're different, stand apart. The third character comes along and you think, well, what's his difference? Is he different to Mr. A in a different way to his difference with Mr. B? And so on and so on. You get that kind of combination, and it's actually the subtlety, because there is in physics this thing which attracts me a lot, interests me a lot. A lot of people don't know about this, and it's so fascinating. It's called the three-body problem. You imagine yourself in empty space, and you've got two things, and they've both got mass, you see, and you can work out exactly how they're going to move. You can write the equation to it. But if you have three, you can't.
You can't.
You can't predict exactly what they're going to do. For me, that's absolutely exciting, and what makes it why? As you implied when you said run with something new, this is the option given by the triad of doing something new, because you can't really predict what's going to happen.
So it's an uncertainty principle.
Uncertainty comes into it, and it's I think there's knowledge in physics, and mathematicians deal with very special cases where you can predict, but it's only special cases, and it usually ends up with the third element being thrown out into infinity, so the two are left happily in the cycle together. But you've got to ask, why am I going on about this? Just to get this sense of the a peculiar kind of equality between the three, which intrigues me. Because you get these labels, the active, passive, and sometimes, in Gurdjieff, in the earliest things you could do it mechanically, so the active is higher, passive is lower, and the neutralizing is in between. You come across that.
Yes.
And you can picture it, this kind of thing, but if you drop that, because let's look at it, as one of us commentators was saying yesterday or today, look at it subjectively, so to speak. That is to say, in a way, you could say the element which is active is coarser than the element which is passive. But you've got these words, you see, and you go denying, passive, and Bennett used to like receptive.
Mm-hmm.
You change the words, but you change the whole colour of it.
Yeah, then the meaning becomes different, doesn't it?
That's the meaning. You see. Denying, you feel like there's a rock. Receptive,
Yes. Oh, that's lovely. I'll have a bit of perceptive.
You're right,
Positive
yeah.
and
Imagine the earth receptive to the rain. It's not denying the rain, this kind of thing. And between people, you can do that. It comes to our conversation. How can you have a conversation in which there is, they can have this role of receptivity active in it, and instead of denial. And that comes again from this third factor, I think. I used to do this exercise. I gave it a special name, a dialogue word, DY, and I said, pointed to something well known. I said, most conversations are structured by the rubric, yes, but. Because everybody likes to appear as if they agree, but really they don't. So it's a yes, but. I said,
so it's a polite way of continuing
Yes.
to get your own opinion in.
Exactly. It's laying down. Yeah, I've heard all of that, but it's, what you said is crap. I'll tell you what really matters. And I say, well, let's distinguish and do yes and to no but. And you make these quite distinctive, and it's quite a hard exercise, because the yes and, for example, you've got to constantly amplify what the other person has said. You think you're receptive. So that's where the third force is there, because you have to suppose both people, in fact, accept a common discipline, this kind of thing. So being receptive is quite something. And so there's, I think, an enablement in that. So it's very much not cut and dried, to try and recapitulate a bit about these three elements having a certain kind of label or shape, so you can say, oh, that's an affirming coming in now. It's like they touch and mold each other, and you get these subtleties, and I say these gradations: denial, passivity, receptivity, and that. And I'm departing a bit more from Gurdjieff now. In about with Mr. Bennett, you see, I mentioned equality, but you can ask yourself, well, of course, one can ask oneself anything, ask oneself if there is an equality between these three elements, what are they equal in?
Yeah, interesting, yeah.
Gurdjieff simply says they're all equally active, in fact. And what Mr. Bennett said, they are all equally will.
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 W-I-double-L.
That boy, will, you see. And he said, those people are not used to using the word will except as a positive force, as an active force. And so he has this terrible idea of willpower, and this kind of thing. But for him, no. And it was had a great influence on me, and I think a lot of my friends at the time. And it influenced his interpretation of the Gurdjieff work and his own spiritual path a great deal. That is to say, when he looked into, he had this idea about, okay, we had this meeting together, and he introduced into, imagine three, whatever they are, jostling around, and he had to, and he used a certain term. He said, which one takes the initiative? It's like, wouldn't it be different, he said, if, you've got to first of all have some kind of idea of taking the initiative means. It's saying this is something quite independent from the characters, active, passive, reconciling, so on. And he said, it's like, something, if the active force takes the initiative, this colors everything. You see. Receptive force takes the initiative, this colors everything. And so they all would color it in a certain way, because that's what's taken the initiative. It's like one of them, those three says, okay, and start something off. But he was subtle in saying, well, it doesn't have to be, starting it off is quite independent from the way they do it. And in particular, we got into all these sort of examples of saying how some things are started, especially from the receptive force. There was a big thing for, and of course his great paradigm was the Virgin Mary, and he said how history was changed when she said, do it to me according to thy will. And it was her act of acceptance which changed human history. But then he went into love with this. He said, look at Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships. She didn't go around and waving a
Come
sword.
and abduct me.
or even that. That's right. And he said it's interesting because you look at it, and the whole world tendency is to only pay attention to somebody who's making a noise, being forceful. And so I understood, almost immediately I understood, yeah, you see, things are enabled to happen because somebody's had an active, receptive initiative. Now this comes out in spiritual practice, because it's like in the Gospels they say, knock and it shall be opened. You have to knock.
It won't come to you, you've got to take that part.
Yeah,
go and like you say, knock on the door.
Even, please, whatever it is, and you think, and it gets exciting in a way, because you see, you're praying to God, whatever it is, or asking God, and you say, well, this God is infinite and you are nothing. And how does this body work? And you got to say, okay, please, like girls say, you've got to say please, otherwise I won't give it to you.
Yeah, don't sit there waiting for it to happen.
That's it, yeah. It's good, just waiting for roast pigeon to fly into your mouth.
That's it.
Like this, you only got to, and it really, because he really felt this, really understood, and he transmitted a lot of that to us. He founded this infinite spiritual world, but you can't. You need to ask. Learn how to ask. And this, I had a sort of hard lesson about this with my dear late friend Ted Matchett, who was actually a design engineer, and he taught engineering design, but he's a very spiritual man, and went to seminars by his, and he said, I have had these, what do you call it, these cards you can write out, what do you call them, note cards?
Or like notelets or...
Button?
Notelets.
Index cards.
Index cards, right,
You know about so big. And he said, I've been through the Gospels and extracted 4 promises made by God towards man. So you come up, take one of these and redeem the promise. I couldn't do it. A lot of people couldn't do it, because that is a true act.
So that was a shock for you.
Tremendous. Well, burnt. And then I understood something remarkable that Bennett said, that, which was, he was a Christian, obviously, he was so completely oriented that way. But he said the most important but worrying feature of the last 2,000 years is that man has not accepted his salvation. It's been the act of salvation, but man needs to accept it. And he has not done this. And he's still living in the old ways.
Yes.
And you look at it and go, what? This is just to emphasize this act of receptivity. Is, the words get tangled. Receptive, you've just got to wait till something hits you. But no, this changes everything. And it's such a disaster in human relations, because you see in groups trying to deal with things, it requires, you can see it in a common sense way, it needs somebody to give way for things to move into a different way. Because nobody wants to give way. Because nobody wants to take this purely receptive role.
Take on the burden.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So relinquish, so give something up. And this enables it all to turn around and this kind of thing. So this, maybe I'm going on too much about this, but it's just to give it a context for this of the reconciliation. What is this element which, enables this act of receptivity to happen? And this was, Bennett elaborated this in various writings and about the triads and all the rest of it. But in going back to Beelzebub and all that, I still continued to be struck by the way in which there was a change. And I think I've got this, excuse me. There was a 1931 version. And you can get copies of that. It had different language and all of that. But one major difference between the two was this. In the first version, he says, in Purgatory, actually, I think it's in Purgatory, he says that he identifies because it's the divine, the theomodern logos is the divine third force. Something like that. So it's the third force, which is the third force of God, which is the Word of God. And it's not an affirmation, it's the third force. But, no, let's just say, take that idea. He said, this third force takes part in every triad throughout the whole of creation. And the implication is that the will of God is involved in everything that happens. And that's quite a stunner.
But if that is true, where does free will come in?
Well, there's very easily.
Explain.
I might get round to it. If I don't do it, you can tie me up. I want to say it first. In the published version, it only's there at the beginning, and then the rest goes by momentum. Going by momentum in the beginning is a very standard traditional thing that goes back to people like Plato and all the rest of it. and in certain miraculous where he's got that old-fashioned, the God absolute, he kickstart the universe, and the rest cascades down, and we're more than light years away from his Holy Son absolute. So it's got nothing to do with us. See, there was the extreme part. So all the beyond the first act of God, it's all mechanical. So it is awful picture he played there, but it's also in Hinduism in a certain form, like that. But then but at first, all and everything, when he got into talking about God in a more human way, it's not true. He's saying this. It's not just the first act of God, but every act has something in it. Now that gives the possibility, you see, of free will. In Model A, you just kickstart the universe, so to speak. No chance, it's all mission.
You just starts working.
It starts working, one thing leads to another, blah, blah, blah. And the first one, no, there's always this element in it. So it means that freedom is everywhere. Because I associate my feeling with the third force, is freedom. You know? So big enablement is freedom. So then we come to something which I shouldn't even, in words, attempt to say, I can explain or understand. You see, it's like, it says that God can't give free will, he gives the possibility of freedom in this kind of thing. People get very tangled about this because you can't reduce it to a fact, so to speak. It just has to be made possible. Okay? But then, then you see, that's why I wanted to have a chance of talking about it in this way, because of Mr. Gurdjieff's way of reconciliation, because that contrast between the two versions of Beelzebub, which has a lot of significance. But then your question about freedom and so on, and what happens in the work is this, you see, it's like, wow, I'll say this, we've been hearing people say, oh, I'm just speculating now so I can do it too.
Of course. Speculate away.
Speculate away, see, this a question of if you get this, the picture that this, if I'm allowed to say, the third force of God is omnipresent, so to speak. This means that in every act, imagine you're involved in an act, I call it an act, in which is the coming together of these three. You and God are not separate. So there's no problem about free will.
Okay.
You see?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not saying there is God and there is me. I'm doing it in this way, so this is like God doing it through me, not even God doing through me. I am God. Now this thing about I am God, you probably heard about it in various traditions like that. Wonderful Sufi Al-Khalaj, and he got executed for his effrontery by saying, I am God.
Oh God, yes.
And see because I believe it comes from this same sense, you see, about how things happen. You see how the quite common role of God creating a universe which is in some way other to him in a very separatist way. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm referring back now to Christianity because it has so strongly this issue, and people who are not Christians hate it and dislike it, like Muslims hate it, will not tolerate the idea about Christ being as God, because for them it's impossible to think that because Allah is totally other. This kind of thing. But this, that God himself could tread on the earth, we can't understand it, and be crucified. This is something the Muslims hate. They even have a story where there was a substitute which was crucified.
That's right, that's in one of the Lost Gospels as well, isn't it? A looky-likey. was set up.
Yeah, you see, because he comment. And I think going back to this idea, and there's a different idea of reconciliation to me, a much more stronger one, of God getting his hands dirty, so to speak, and you don't really, well, all the other great figures in Buddhas, you have a taste of this, but of course it's so extreme in Christianity, and I think it's possibly why Christianity is so rejected these days by a lot of people, because they can't, it's too violent, it's extreme. How is it possible for that which is highest and beyond to be present in this contingent life, you see, in this kind of thing? Now, then I might have, if I'd done some homework, go in to look at all these sacred individuals which Beelzebub encounters, or Gurdjieff talks about. What is this situation sacred? Sent from above. See, that's the way he deals with it. He is, you see, which is kind of not as strong as and blatant as Christianity, but he has an, and he never quite. What does he mean, sent from above? Dropped in as I don't know, silly metaphor to like agents parachuted behind the lines.
Sent down from the holy, holy Son Absolute or
That's
something.
right.
Yeah.
I imagine, and there's no sense of what it would have been for them, you sent from above like that, in the sense of, which was really in principle for me the same terrible conundrums about Christ. How could he be God and man simultaneously? This is absolutely impossible, because he couldn't experience as a man if he had the God vision. You see, it would be unfair. But the insistence in Christianity, and I really thank them for it, was to adopt such a stupid and unimaginable and impossible thing, because that really put one on the spot and said, this is something which is unique. And so on. But it's the same in Buddha or Krishna or whatever. Zoroaster. He had, because Gurdjieff was a different way in the ordinary life. He said, well, these are saintly people who come up with some good ideas, moral principles, but in Gurdjieff it ain't like that, because it's sent from above. So in a way, it's a cheat.
But he had to be sent from above maybe because there was no one on earth
doing
it.
They're doing what the earthlings can't do. What is done from below is still sent from above. And so you think, what's going on here? You've got this God doing all this kind of stuff, and then he's got to keep getting troubleshooters sent down to sort out problems on the shop floor because he hasn't done it right in the first place. So it goes on and on like that.
It's as though he can't interfere himself, though, can he?
Pardon?
He can't interfere himself, and that's why he has to send these others in from above. And you could say that with things like Christianity or any of the religions. Allah never interferes, does he? He sends his angel down to speak to Muhammad. I think
That's
the same
right.
with the Indian ones. They send various, I can't think of any examples down.
See, well, that's the radical thing which, of course, Gurdjieff circumvents around, because Christianity is God himself comes down. There are religions not, like Buddhism, there is no God. In Islam, he would never come down because it's incompatible. You see, in Judaism, much the same. But you see what I mean? It's the extremes there. That's why I talk about Gurdjieff's way of reconciliation. And I wanted to raise the looking at, draw attention to this. What is it that, because, you see, this will of God thing, if you look at it from perspective of the affirming force, you get the creator God, the Old Testament God, the Yahweh, the Demiurge, and so on. But you're looking for the third force is quite different. You see, and because you know about the conflict between the Gnostics and the Christians. You see, the Gnostics, this is a false world, it's a fake. And
It was all made by like you say, the Demiurge.
That's
is
right.
son.
And you see, when he said this world of compassion, which is beyond this world, you see, you have to go through the illusion, break through the illusion and get to it. And there's a lot of sort of Gnostic field in Gurdjieff himself. But the Christian said, you cannot have this one whole thing. And, and some people actually cite, it's in Genesis, and again, seemingly primitive but extraordinary statements, da-da-da-da-da, and he saw that it was good. Now that's there as a major, it may seem material thing, that's a major thing because that countervenes the Gnostics and the dualists and all the rest, because they're saying the existing world has goodness in it itself. It's not.
But the Gnostics say in Genesis there's two creation myths, isn't there?
Yeah.
And it's the second one that's the one that the demiurge made.
Yes.
With all the trouble and
All
strife.
the troubles, yeah. And then, like the reference I somebody made just now to the Matrix, which is a very good presentation of it. But you see, if you take it from the idea of the, you get the creator you see as a maker. You mentioned the demiurge, and I want to add in here that in general, because we've studied all these kind of mythologies and the language of it, the demiurge is associated with dealing with an existing matter or material. That's why his image in a lot of primitive stories is that of the potter.
Yes.
Because he just takes something and shapes it, you see. But that's why fiat, fiat lux is creation ex nihilo, creation from nothingness, which we started with talking about.
Talking about the beginning, yes.
That's the real McCoy, and it was an important. It must have been an important event. I feel it was in human history, because where it was localized, I don't know. Because imagine all early people were seeing something coming from something. You know, the earth, the animals, reproduction, the seasons, the soil, the whatever it was. Everything was coming from something. And about where does this all come from? You see it.
But they probably didn't have the concept of something could come from nothing.
No, I mean, it's very sophisticated. It's because that period, because I've got what's the period of the religions, you know, really from, was really from Zoroaster to Muhammad, and encompassing Buddha and so on. There was, yes, you can treat it as a tremendous workshop trying to deal with this kind of thing, but involving that nothingness. You know, in Islam say, the laws of the universe are the habits of Allah.
Oh, I've not heard that one.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah. A lot of saying, isn't it? But I want to really have read David Holt this thing about the reconciling term. You see, if it's going, another part of what I said, you just look at it as solving the problem of sorting out the conflict, or between the plus and the minus, so to speak. I think that's the lesser view of it. I think a greater view of it is, you know, around these ideas of enablement, because this addresses one, because in life you can see things in your life and so on, and you know you cannot do, you cannot do. This is, and then where does this can do come from? And you feel it's something, it has to be both independent of you, but also deeply you at the same time. And that's what I feel about the reconciling.
So that's it's two forces coming together, isn't it?
But it's not so much, I'm just trying to see it in the same one. Because I want to lead it back, lead it towards, I have a friend who's very keen on this, talking about this age of revelation and saying that there is a strand, you see, in spirituality. Steiner has it in one form, but I'm not sure about Gurdjieff, but Bennett had it, which is that, in truth, I mentioned I am God, but in truth, I am Christ. And there is this option of dealing with that kind of unity, which is not like the one is taking over the other. It's the kind of unity in which the independence, or say here the human, is not annihilated. I'd like to say, I've been overcome, none of this overcomeness. It's something which can penetrate into the ordinariness of life. It's not like, I will achieve this God realization and all this kind of thing like Ken was talking about on the first night. I think, as like the story, I don't know if you've heard of her, Bernadette Roberts,
No.
which is an American mystic. She just died recently. Incredible, in the Catholic church, and she was a nun for a time, but she had a very religious upbringing, incredible insights. A few friends of mine met her and so on, but she, in her autobiography, in her statements, I'm just quoting it, she said at the age of 16 she had God realization. And then she sort of said, oh, what am I going to do then? So she got married, had kids.
I just lived a normal life.
That's right. I've done that. I mean, it sounds funny, but I can kind of appreciate it intellectually. And then she said, "Oh, well, no, there is some unfinished business. I got to get beyond God." And you think, what?
Beyond God.
Beyond God and God, and you get it in Sufism. You mentioned Hassan Shushu, the way of Itlaq Yolu, absolute liberation is towards God, in God, and beyond God is the whole statement. You think, well, are these people arch lunatics? They're not satisfied with God realization. They've got to get beyond all that. And you think, what's going on here? But for me, this is just a word, but it speaks to me of this wonderful, wonderful sense of reconciliation, the reconciling will. And you see it as a reconciling will. So it's not reconciliation as the closure of the business, but it's a reconciling will, which is always new.
So it's like what is beyond the nothing will be
Beyond
something
the nothing, yeah.
new.
You can look in the nothingness and say, "Hi, friend. So what's new?" This kind of thing, So these, and for me, it's a passion because the influence of Mr. Bennett. I mean, in many regards, the things I hear him say in his books irritate me intensely, and because he was a man, he had his bad hair days and his good days, kind of thing, and he went up and down. But he had a tremendous insight, One thing, you've got to search for it, though, because people worried about, look, oh God, I had this experience, I'm really sore, da-da-da. Then you say, no, why can't I get back to it? I thought I saw something there. And I had a very deep experience when I was very young, about 18, something like that, and I was in the ideas. I was actually with a friend, and something happened, and I was burst into tears. And I said, "What is going on?" I said, "Because I know I'm awake now, but I know I will soon be asleep.
Mm-hmm.
I will not be able to stop myself." And it broke my heart. It really did. I never had it as clear and intense. You're an adolescent, and things are strong. Adolescent, that kind of
So it's like you were given that glimpse.
Yeah, but I knew it would pass.
Mm-hmm.
All this would pass.
But most people go looking for that again and again and again.
And
Can't find it, and then they get disappointed, I think, and perhaps that's why they come off the path.
That is true. And to introduce possibly another picture, view of that is to say that this attitude of, and it seems really perverse in a way, this attitude of taking the days when you're really stupid, you're just angry with everything, you're dulled out, you can't put two and two together and all that. And you think, what's the use of this?
Yes.
This is obviously bad. And you say, have it. And you keep on imagining that, of course, that superior people don't have days like that. I think it's...
But they do.
They do.
Yeah.
One of the blessed things that gave him one of my stores of heaven, he said, and I think I told you it once before, they were working on a pond at Coombe Springs and flashing the water, so he came and in his very coloured underpants, and they started talking about holiness. And he said, he said, maybe I'm a holy man, he said. And interesting, he said, what is a holy man? Somebody who can enter into higher worlds at will.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, holy men can always make mistakes. Yeah.
Well, it's because it's a struggle every day to stay holy.
Yeah, or whatever. But it's, and then also said, he said that he said people imagine I'm conscious all the time. He said no, consciousness is a very precious substance. I'm only conscious when I need to be conscious. I think, well, what? Because the ordinary punter's viewer said, oh, this consciousness is good. I want a lot of it all of the time. I don't want to be unconscious. Unconscious is bad. More conscious is good. But Bennett saying, no. You've got all this multiplicity in ourselves because it's not to be defined in any one good, so to speak. It's not like that. And why do we get in these? You can look at reason about it. Why do we get in these rotten states? We can't see anything and think. Because if we can, in a sense, remember them, we're in the high states, and begin to put the two together, then we get understanding. Because if our understanding is based on having an energy and experience, then it's still limited, it's subjective, you see. But if you have an understanding which is with you when you're being stupid or silly, whatever these words are, that's the understanding has got to go through everything, even to these stupid things, so it's like a test. And so all these images you see of exile, separation, or they're enacted in us, in our lives. It's not just the A1 days, it's the zeta infinity days.
The days when we act like fools and...
Fools,
yeah.
I'm a fool, you see. So this, Bennett could elaborate his thoughts, he was wonderful schemes of hierarchies, and he would go beyond and beyond and beyond and beyond, But always he would turn around in the end and say, well, it's all here and now.
Because the now is the only thing that matters, really, isn't it?
This is where it's at, and this is where the Hieropath is at, and all of that. This is where it's at. Gurdjieff was a genius. A lot of things he said about time and so on, but just everyone's got to find it in that moment. You see, like you and I meeting together. How did it happen? Why did it happen? Don't know. Hardly know. A simple thing like this, and wanted to add into our conversation about something I don't agree with it. You get one side of Gurdjieff with all the stuff about nothing is accidental in objective art and all the rest of it, and my belief is that it's just provocation, and because you mentioned hazard earlier on, I think we began talking, it's actually this hazard and mistakes and so on, which are crucial, and like scientists now are finding this out, these old ideas of order and so on are extremely limited, and they work only in certain very stable regions of behavior and action and so on. You can do that, but you're discovering more and more, and things that are counterintuitive, like when you get something being communicated, it works better when you add noise to it, and you think, wow, why? Why is there need for all that? So, Gurdjieff's picture, as far as I'm concerned, intellectually, it's very one-sided and wrong. But also this exposure to hazard means, what does exposure mean? Why, you come into this room, I'm doing all the talking, I know. But you see, we started from this, we have a separation, we're not the same people. So the whole universe is changed. You come into the room. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And that's, even these random interactions happening at this conference. This is, in a sense, where it's at more than people going to sitting quiet in the morning or doing movements, whatever it is. It's laid on. Because I believe in my heart of hearts that Gurdjieff really meant it when he said the work should be in life.
It's the only way we do learn, isn't it? When we're actually out there living our lives, and then having to try to remember to put the effort in to be, while you're just doing normal everyday things and interacting with people that aren't in the work.
Exactly. And trying to do anything, make a cup of tea, whatever. It just doesn't have to be a deep thing. Because I'm absolutely grateful for you for enabling us to do this experiment. It is an experiment, and I really genuinely, I tried to make a few notes. I tried to remember what I wrote to the planning committee as my outline and all this sort of thing, but it disappeared because that moment to really address what was real, which is you coming into the room. That was reality. In what it means. So you take on from there. And, even I do it now and I feel this something in my hands, it's just weird. Because everything it's really physical in a kind of way. Yes, I did. There was one point I did put into my memory to remember, and it's about this whole thing of work on oneself. Because for me, in a way, straightforwardly, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to work on myself. And I picture myself like doing this, or like Dr. Strangelove.
So you're like trying to strangle yourself,
pull
your brains out.
Yeah, and put myself on bootlaces with that kind of thing, or tweaking. And of course, I can massage myself a bit and do this kind of work on myself. But then I began to think, well, the basic thing I do know, is cooperating with other people working on you. Just because there are other people and different, and other people are the pain in the neck, and all the rest of it, all the lovely, whatever it is, that I can understand, And you might think in a pious way, God works on us or something like this, you see. But I do work on myself. I thought, on a conceptual, I just don't get it. But I can see this. It's possible, you see, through the reconciling forces. To me, it tastes like that. And that's all I can say, because it overcomes this causality in a way, because it's not one thing acting on another anymore. See, like that.
They're more working together?
Working together, like, and in your new world, you say, people say, why? You're making me angry, or whatever, or what you were trying to do to me, and all this, this primitive causality. But, in a moment, you see, what moves my hands now, you see. And we know we have a world in education, and the stages of subtlety in this. You get within this Gurdjieff work and so on, you get an exemplification of what I call a deviation into an alternative worldview, because in the ordinary world as such, people living in these social roles and these mechanical roles and so on, and you go into this which maybe helpfully offers another perspective, and then you learn, oh, I have an essence, and what I had before was a personality, then you get into essence, then there's another stage, you get the whole issue of individuality, which is for me where Christ comes into the picture, because essence is not enough.
You have to go that step higher, kind of.
It was higher, you see, then the question about the higher, and there's something more real, and it actually corresponds. It came up to the reference to the third series and the two worlds in the third world, you see. Because you can take the first world to be the outer world and the personality, and the second world the inner world or essence. See, if you look at the stuff, it's actually explicitly in Gurdjieff and in Bennett about how and he actually got these words for it, the true inner world is a third world. The second world, which is taken by people to be the inner world, is not. It's a fake world too. But the third world is a genuine inner world. Have a look at the third series again, it's fascinating this. So again, the third. And so when we learned with Bennett about action and so on, we go from this primitive notion of force, or pushing, There was a subtlety of receptivity, as he did in his own work, going from the active ways of work to the receptive ways of work. You've got to be able to be helped. You've got to be receptive to influences. You've got to accept something for it to be really part of you. And these are not brave things, heroic things, but these enable things to happen in you. And he was very great revolution for him to see raw effort and so on. But always remain complete, because you've got to allow things to happen to you. Be done to you. And he knew that. But then you come to the third force, and he said, what was the line of work for the third force? He called it manifestation. The perfection of doing. Whatever. Playing Hamlet, hosting a party, walking down the road. It's always there. What can only be always there is God. It's not anything temporary in the human world or anything like that, or that's what I happened to think about the work or whatever it was, or anything like that, or anything in a book, whatever it's got to be in. What can be present in every microsecond is God.
And we can attain that.
You don't even have to attain it. We can realize that.
Realize it, okay.
For me, it's very, honestly, Debbie, I have a very dear friend who's my friend who's suffering from brain cancer, and he's so slowly dying. And he's a devout Catholic and devotee of Mary, Virgin Mary, and he's been trying to write the last 5 to 10 years about his idea about this being the age in religion of the age of will. But the notion about will, which is a Bennett notion, imagine, it is that it's so abstract when you put it in words. It's like the will is not divided by the one and the many, for example. You see, because will is actually beyond number, and it's that which therefore can enable me to say, I am Christ, without arrogance, and without it being based on an experience or anything like that. And you are Christ. And one day I could say this, and I hate you, but could still do that. Another time I love you, and so on. And it's all around the circuit of a work on oneself. And I say, there is this work, and I say, I think for me, you see, the work is like, because I'm a Christian, and I must in terms of my language, because language has a big influence, kind of thing. You say, do I truly believe in Christ? And I say, well, I don't know. But the language is there, and I find this extraordinary myself, because I've now reached a point where I can say things, and somebody asks me, do you really believe in it? And I say, I don't know. But they are said. The act of saying to me is sacred. Mm-hmm. This kind of thing. So not the work on oneself, and you say, well, because it's been struggled with by religion, Christian religion, for a long time. Some idea that it's all predestined, because how can we ourselves go against God's will, what he has in mind for us, and he's eternal, omnipotent, so the whole past is there and we have to just accept it. It was very, very common. You see, the others, oh no, we have to do it all ourselves. And again, there's a need for this reconciliation. And I so much struggle to find the language for it, to allow this to happen in us. But that, you see, even that reintroduces some separation. There's some separate agency in me, like channeling, this kind of. It's not like that, because it's like being more intimate, and I do this and make a simple gesture, man. I really make this gesture, and this, what I'm talking about, comes into operation. Because all my attention, all my effort and ability and so on, it's not just going gaga, being limp and picked up and going, or spouting something in a trance or anything. It's nothing to do with trance. And for me, that's what I'm struggling with now about the work and so on. I think a lot of this language is so archaic, and it's got this contradiction in it. You see, it's really impossible in this picture, Gurdjieff's picture of man the machine, for such an entity to ever work on itself.
Because we're too robotic.
Yeah. See, where does this come in? A few people are smart. Daily King is one of them who sort of struggle with this and goes something interesting. But oh no. And what is it? Because that somehow it's just like this. It's a very ordinary story. One day you're going on and you go, oh, what about that then? Something goes, what about that then? Or you read something and then you actually read it. And it goes, oh, could that be true? These little things, little moments, you see. And
Little glimpses of light.
light, yes. And you say, this is the grace of God touching me? I don't know. But it's something which might enter into every particle of this.
That's amazing.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
No, because you see, who's done this? I remember one speaking. I got the brain with memories and all that. But you see, what is the truth here?
But I was the one that instigated it. Yeah.
There you are.
Through different forces.
You can see the different forces coming together, and we have.
And from that comes the show, which is the third.
Yeah. Maybe, and then you I'm feeling goosebumps. Going on me. What is the time?
Well, we've been talking for quite a while, so I think maybe we should call it a day.
Okay.
And I'd like to say thank you very much, Tony.
Well, bless you for this. I was getting more and more worried. I thought, I can't. I'm going to come up with. God, well.
We'll come up with some wonderful things, and I think we can carry on this another time if we want to.
Mm-hmm.
But from Portland, Oregon, I think we should call it a day. Thank you.
A day. It is a day.
The